Welcome to the AxeCast podcast. Conversations with interesting people from the world of Acadia athletics and more, talking about their lives, successes, and failures. And now let's join hosts Glenn Hawley and Eric Cederberg for the next 15 to 20 minutes as they dive into the life of today's guest.
This week on our AxeCast, we're joined by one of Acadia football greats and enjoyed a great career in the CFL, living in Kentville, but all the way hailing from Cape Breton. Bruce Beaton joins us on the AxeCast. Bruce, thanks for doing this.
No problem at all, Lane.
Port Hood, Nova Scotia. Now, I heard rumors that you grew up not playing football. Any truth to that?
Yeah, that's completely true. Yeah, it's something I picked up at Acadia.
What did you do for sports growing up in Port? And I should point out, and people probably, anybody that's a hockey fan knows that, Mike McPhee's from that area that played with the Montreal Canadiens, and Al McGuinness, and of course Bruce Beaton. So were you a hockey guy growing up, or did you play sports?
I didn't have a lot of opportunity to play hockey. I was from a family of seven, a farm family. It just wasn't in the cards. I begged my way in as an early teen and played actually my first year at Acadia intramural. But I played volleyball a little bit in high school. I love sports. I always loved sports. It was just something that wasn't really available to me, given my responsibilities on the farm. The busyness of our lifestyle, my parents' lifestyle, the fact that, back in the day, there wasn't this level of parental involvement in sport, and it really wasn't possible even to run seven kids around without cell phones and without means of communication and all those things. But boy, I grew up watching sports, watching the CFL, watching the Expos and the Blue Jays and, Dave, Steve and those guys, and throwing pitches against the side of the house and doing, I figured out training in high school and really got into that with a whole bunch of really good athletes in our area. From the oldest would probably be Al McGuinness, all the way down to guys 2 or 3 years younger than me that played in the queue and had NHL tryouts. And, so we ran the gamut in the little weight room I built in high school, and was around a lot of really good athletes. So I always had that love and that interest, and I guess you'd say that competitiveness and that desire to improve at something. I just didn't have a sport vehicle for that coming from where I came from.
No, what's interesting is, you've got an interesting story. So if you look over the last, 40 or 50 years in the recruiting of university student athletes, and I underline recruiting. Obviously, you didn't play football, so I would have to think you weren't recruited. So you've got an interesting story here on how this all developed for you to play with the Axemen. So sort of dive into that a little bit, Bruce.
I was kind of a young, crazy guy off a farm, and went to Acadia just because my brother went there 2 years before me. He made it the whole year before he wasn't invited back, but he had a hell of a good time and told me all about it. And so I was heading there, and what a beautiful spot. I can still remember. Now it's been well over 30 years. I remember my first drive into the valley, and the elm trees that used to line the road when you drove in Grand Prairie before Dutch elm disease, and just the sheer staggering beauty of the valley coming from a beautiful place, but a different place. Cape Breton's got more of a rugged beauty, and but the valley had this beautiful, lush look to it. And then I went and I moved into Eaton House, and I had just turned 18 years old, and I had a great first year in the sense that I was on a floor with a lot of Cape Bretoners, a lot of Newfoundlanders. It was a second floor eating house. And it was just an absolute gong show. It was before co-ed residences or anything like that. And man, Newfoundlanders are so funny. And of course, Cape Bretoners are pretty crazy. And the rules were more lax back then. And I had this crazy roommate from North Sydney who he only lasted 1 year or two. And so we were just having a heck of a good time. And I got a letter one day from Sonny Wolf, and I opened this letter, and he wants to meet with me. And I thought, oh, like what did we do, right? What some of the boys are in trouble. Like something happened, and someone identified me, and I had to go down and deal with, you know what I mean, whatever these crazy people were up to, or what. I didn't know what the letter was, right? It was just. So I walk down there and I go into Sonny's little office. You remember, Berg, you remember Sonny's little office, you know, and I sit in there, and he tells me that he had been watching me. Well, first of all, he had heard about me from a friend of mine, Rob McGinnis, who, again, for people who don't know their Nova Scotia hockey history, he was a really good player who played 1 year for Acadia, and he was from Port Hood. Of course, he's the brother of Al McGinnis, who's a Hall of Fame NHL player. And we're all from Port Hood, and Port Hood's a really small place. It would be smaller than Canning, kind of thing, to give it a local flavor. And then, so even though he was about 4 years, three and a half, 4 years older than me, we were good buddies. We came up to Acadia together. He was coming from major junior. I was coming right out of high school. And we were sitting watching an Acadia football game, and I made some sort of offhand comment, you know, that I thought I could play that game, right? And I liked physicality, and I loved sports, and was just, I don't know, just Port Hooders, a little crazy. So he took that, being from a really strong sport family, he took that to his head coach, who was Tom Coolin at the time, and Tom took it to Sonny. And of course, with football, you're always looking for length. You're always looking for guys that can be defensive ends, tight ends, offensive tackles. It's always a rare commodity to find people like that can walk and chew gum and learn and got a little strength to them, and that sort of thing, right? So, so Sonny had heard about me through Rob McGinnis, Tom Coolin, and Rob can be very, very persuasive. And so then he saw me playing basketball, which is also a sport I'd never played. Basketball is not big in Port Hood. But I had learned to play basketball, table tennis, squash, everything going. I was learning at Eaton House with all these crazy guys and the fun we were having and all that, which included partying, but included a ton of gym time, right? Because I'd never been around a facility like that where I had all these resources, man. I was there every day. So then I cruise into Sonny's little sweatshop of an office and meet this really smooth talking, very verbose, great conversational little man who had this passion for football and his shorts pulled up, and you know, just the way he had a really vibrant way of talking, right? Really great at connecting with people, and became a great friend over the years because he's such a good connector, such a good, I guess you'd call him a good recruiter, but it's not a malicious term. The recruiting comes from his ability to connect with people, and he's fun and he's passionate about football. And so he tells me he wants me to try out for the football team and come out for spring camp. And I'm like, no, I just not even, no way. Like not, I've seen these guys in the weight room, and I was, rangy, even though I'd been training in our little weight room that I built in Port Hood, I could barely, like these guys, when you'd see them in the little weight room before we got the new weight room at Acadia, I mean, these guys are benching 300-400 pounds and doing stuff that was way off the charts for me, right? It's just like, holy, like there was just no, it was just something that was like, it was like asking me to go to the moon. And I was afraid of heights, that sort of gap. But being Sonny, he talked me into it. And I'm walking out of there thinking, how did I just agree? You had me in there for probably an hour, and somehow I agreed at the end of this to take this step and do this. And boy, I'm just dreading spring camp. Like, why did I say I would do this? What is this? I mean, and so I show up on that day, and I mean, I don't know anyone on the team. I don't even know how to put the gear on. I've never been in a locker room before. I've never read a playbook. I don't know anything. Like I don't know anyone or anything. And no one even knows why I'm there, kind of thing. You just sort of end up in these lineups and getting this gear, and you're looking around, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how to put it on. And never had a jock strap on before, never put on the stuff underneath. Then there's a garter kind of thing, and you just, and then then I'm in these lineups for drills, and someone reminded me, and I said, no, I never played tight, but I think they had me a tight end at first and linebacker, or then defensive end, all in that first week, and I mean, it's a bit of a blur to me, but I remember some of the drills. Like I remember being in the lineup, and I remember, now I know, okay, I'm in the defensive end lineup, and we're getting ready to do one-on-ones, right? Where, if these days there's so much on the internet about football, and there's so much on TV, and everybody knows, an offensive tackle or an offensive guard takes a pass set, and the defensive end or the defensive tackle tries to beat them. And it's very similar to trying to beat someone one-on-one in basketball without a ball. And then but you can use your hands like a martial artist to so using fakes and getting an edge. For a middling football program, a lot of these will end up in stalemates, right? Because, so I'm in the lineup and I'm looking, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what the purpose is. I don't know. And I'm getting closer and closer to the front, and all I can see is, okay, it looks like two people grab each other and then shake each other as much as possible, and then the coach blows the whistle. So I get in my stance, and he says hot, and I grab the guy and I just start shaking him left, shaking him right. I don't know, and then coach blows the whistle, and then now I'm through the drill, right? I'm on to the next drill. I can remember another drill where I think I was in with the linebackers on this drill, and there was this thing where they had me in a 3-point stance, and then they had a fullback type in a 3. And this was bad because I ended up first in the line, right? And it's a bad place to be when you have absolutely no clue what the drill is. And the things as Berg knows, things happen fast in football. Right? Like bam, bam, bam. You're in the lineup. Let's go. Oh, someone got hurt. Move the drill. Let's go. You're trying to get as much on video, see what you got, that sort of thing. Teach what you can. So I end up first in the line, and there's a fullback. This guy that, things come around eventually, but a guy named Jimmy Talbot. I think Talbot was his name. A kid from Truro, and. So I'm in my stance, he's in his stance, he's like 10 yards away. And I didn't know, but the coach says hut or blows the whistle, and we're both supposed to run toward each other, and you make contact. And then the linebacker is supposed to try and shed the fullback and get, to somewhere between the cones, right? So you're taking on a block, you're shedding a block, and the fullback is supposed to try and block you out of that gap, right? He boom, blows the whistle, and I don't even get out of my stance because I'm first in the line. I have no idea. And Talbot gets a 10-yard run, which is 30 feet, and just gets to knock me over backwards from my stance, and everyone's laughing, and everyone's, and that's sort of the start for football for me, right? And that tells you what kind of guy I am, that I don't forget those things, right? And that's a good sign if you're going to be successful, right? Because it all comes around once you sort it out and figure it out. But so I get to the end of that spring camp, right? And I'm like, oh, thank God that's over, like, then I get the letter inviting me back to fall camp. And I take that home to Port Hood, and I'm working on the farm. And again, my parents aren't sports people, right? My mom's a Dutch immigrant, came over like a lot of Dutch immigrants after the Second World War, the 1950s. And my dad's like an 8th generation Scot from Cape Breton, right? And their sport is not a big thing, right? It's like farming and hunting and just different way of thinking. And there's a lot of work on our farm, and not a lot of money, and resources were tight, and labor was needed. And I'm thinking all summer, I'm thinking, how am I going to tell them that I got to leave a week early to go back to Acadia for football camp, right? Like I'm just dreading it. So I'm putting it off, and putting it off, and putting it off, and I'm just training in this weight room I built, and again, another one of the McGinnis brothers. Paul McGinnis, who's right in the middle between, he's just a couple of years older now, McGinnis. He worked at the mill in Port Hawkesbury, the big pulp mill. And so he manufactured a couple of, they would be about probably 30 or 40 pound weight plates with handles like cut in so you could put your hands inside them, which was to my specifications. And I'd be jumping up hills and doing kind of like my own version of any kind of explosive training, any kind of farm type explosive training to get stronger, to get ready, and plus the little weight room that I had built in high school. And I dreaded it, and I dreaded it, and I dreaded it. And finally I told my parents, we got about the second week of August, I said, hey, I got to leave next week to, and they're like, sure. I said, oh my God, I can't believe I put that off all summer, right? They were like, fine, no problem, So anyway, I go up, and my goal is that they can cut me if they want. I'm perfectly fine with that, but I'm not going to quit. So that was my only goal going in. And it was a good goal to have, because, when you don't know what you're doing, and it's tough, right? It's tough and you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, right? Because you're like, you came to Acadia to get an education, get on with your life. For me to get off the farm and get out of Cape Breton and do something interesting, right? Because I was always like a scholarly type guy. Anyway, so I walk in to Sonny's office to say, hey, ready to go and give this a whirl, right? And Sonny says, great, looking forward to saying, and I want you to meet your coach, your D-line coach, because I'm going to play defensive end. And it was a guy named Al Hartley, who played on the 1979 and 1981 championship teams. A terrific athlete, really smart guy, really amazing teacher. And he saved me. I mean, he was so great for me. He was like a spirit coach for me, right? Because there's a whole way you have to approach sport, like a reckless, aggressive, alpha kind of way of trying to be great. And it involves, you got to have this spirit about it. And he put his arm around me as we were walking down the hallway, coming out of Sonny's office. I still remember this, and I still remember the feeling. And he was like, you're going to be my special project this year. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to be great. And we're going to have a great time. And then it went from there. And then it was something that was a long grind, to where I eventually got, but it started from those humble roots, and it started with, Sonny's ability to talk me into it, and then Al's ability to coach me. And then kind of the third piece of the puzzle for me was the friends I met in football, and a lot of the training techniques, the passion, the multi-sport training, and the desire to continuously improve that I learned from that kind of crazy aggressive friend group in football that I became very attracted to.
And what's
Let me just outline something. The first time I met Bruce, or the first time I saw Bruce, was that first year of football. And I got to say that great football player, really bad at the 12-minute run. As I'm looking at this guy sitting in the stands, D-line's doing the 12-minute run, and I'm wondering, who is this tall, lanky guy who's just got these pounding strides? And it was Bruce Beaton.
Well, there's a funny story about that, because and this is the way I approach things, and this is why there was so much learning and so much good film and bad film, and because it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back for me. I just had this theory for the 12-minute run that if I simply long strided, max stride the 12-minute run, that I could run it incredibly efficiently, that I could take less steps, that I could, and this is the analytical way that I, I'm sure it didn't look great. It's another failed experiment in a whole long line of failed experiments. But again, I think you got to have that approach. I think you got to be an independent thinker, and I think you got to,
So Harvey didn't coach you up on the 12-minute run then, did he?
Problem with my friend group is that they're all independent thinkers, and in a game that involves so much anaerobic strength and anaerobic explosive power and 5 to 6 second plays, we were so antagonistic to the idea of training for a 12-minute jog anyway, that it was always a problem. I hung around with guys who were almost too smart for where training was in the program at that time.
Yeah, that was always questioned. Why the 12-minute run?
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, like you show up at a case. So you think about a hockey guy, you think about Al McGinnis, plays minor hockey, aspires to play in the NHL, goes to play junior, gets drafted, has a great career. None of that. Like, there's no parallel for you, because this isn't even on your radar. You have a conversation in the football stadium with Rob McGinnis, and the next thing you know, you're trying out for a football team. And 4 years later, 5 years later, you're drafted in the first round of the CFL by the BC Lions. Like, I can't look at you and ask you the question, did you ever aspire to be a football player and play pro? Because you didn't.
No, I mean, different sports require a different incubation period. So again, football is one of those sports that it requires certain genetic capabilities at certain positions that, I remember a story growing up. I used to be a big Sports Illustrated guy, and I remember they found some kid in a big major NCAA program, some African kid, just moved to the States, just was 18, and somehow word got around that he was really fast, smart kid, and he tried out. He somehow got a look at a high-end NCAA program, and I'm familiar with some African people, because we used to have some African people that would come over as part of an exchange program with other Canadian students to work on our farm, and a lot of times, so like they would run the 5-mile race and stuff in Port Hood, and they run it barefoot, right? And so he wanted to run on the field for this NCAA coach barefoot, and he never heard of cleats, they found us some cleats. That guy, once they saw him run and move, became an NFL Pro Bowler. Like, you think about that, like that doesn't happen in hockey either. There's no parallel. But so the idea that, you know, you find these guys that can play offensive tackle, or they can play defensive end at the highest levels of football, or they can play, you know, corner, or fairly simple one-on-one type positions because they have certain physical attributes. Like, you know, I've got really long arms, you know, good learner, fairly aggressive, good balance, good hand quickness, different. So very teachable, you know, so, and a lot of passion and willingness to work hard. And so it's not unprecedented in football. I know it sounds like an amazing story, but it's not unprecedented in football. It's one of the things about football that really makes it such an inclusive sport, is that you don't need this tremendous parental involvement from an early age, and you don't need a lot of money from an early age. You can join in, you can become part of the team. And it teaches this fantastic life lesson that's really about how to take whatever innate talents or abilities you have and hone those so that you become a skilled participant, and you become someone who can make a contribution to a larger group because you've got a specialty and you're really reliable with that specialty. And I don't know if there's a sport that is that good a microcosm of fitting into a complex economy like the North American economy than that is. So I love football from that perspective, right? I love it because it's chess. I love it because it's athletic, and it's really this really great combination of power and speed, and then you've got this body control and ballet aspect to catching balls and make, you know, it's really a neat sport. But I really like it because it's also inclusive, and you end up with a whole bunch of people from different places, and it's really an integrative type experience. So I know it sounds like an amazing story, but I was actually just kind of a, you know, just a guy where, you know, if you said, well, you know, draw up a lineman, you'd say, well, geez, I'd like him to you know, be 6'5", 6'6". I'd like him to eventually be up in that 300 to 320 range. I'd like him to be strong. I'd like him to be really laterally quick. I'd like him to take a martial arts approach to the precision around training combative skills like hand placement and eye discipline. You know, I'd like him to be really coachable, like him to be really aggressive. Well, I was that guy.
Do you think, Bruce, it's interesting. I look, you know, I said you were drafted in '91 by the BC Lions. So obviously around that time, you're going to your first CFL camp. Is there a point when you're throwing on the gear and you're walking out on the field with these pro guys for the first time going, how in the heck did I get here? I'm here. Like, you know, again, you weren't aspiring to do that before Acadia, but now all of a sudden you're on a CFL training camp field.
Yeah, the whole thing was a really surreal experience. I wasn't ready for any aspect of it. I wasn't ready to have that first meeting with Sonny. I wasn't ready to go to spring camp. I wasn't ready for my first fall camp. I wasn't ready to start to play. I wasn't ready for anything. I remember my first plane flight ever in my life was going to the combine, and my second plane flight in my life was going to the draft. They flew in the people they thought were going to go in the first round, so the top 8 sort of thing. And I don't know, they probably flew in 10 or 12 guys. I don't know. I remember meeting like with Denise Wolf, you know, to help me buy a suit and help me, like, I never owned a suit, you know. I wasn't ready for anything, so I didn't know anything about anything at every level. It was like really difficult that way, and you know, so it was quite a difficult. The whole thing was a difficult journey. Every part of it, and then even being in the CFL. You know, it wasn't until my third year when I met a guy who really knew how to play. And I was getting this terrible advice from this offensive line coach that we had in Montreal. And as usual, I was working hard, full tilt, boom, 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 hitting the back, doing, and this guy who looked just like me, he just, after probably 10, 15 minutes of individual work with this coach, who later went on to be a head coach and a general manager, have a 30-year career in the CFL. Nothing against him. This is coaching. This is coaching everywhere, and even in the NFL, you get good ones, and you get guys that just think they know. Anyway, this guy ambles over to me, and he says in a southern drawl, "Y'all do that this weekend, you're gonna get killed." And I said, "Pardon?" And he said, what he was saying was, if you do that this weekend, you're going to get killed. Once I deciphered what he was saying, I was like, what do you mean, right? He goes, "You can't block like that." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That's not how you play." I said, "What do you mean?" And so it turned into this relationship of like this. I got lucky because this really smart player, right, who was really good athlete. He was a college All-American in basketball and football in the States, right? I think there's 6 or 7 of those guys in history, right? And he's a high-end recruit. They have all these stars and all this system down there. And he goes to the University of Virginia because at that time there was a legendary coach at the University of Virginia, and that's where a lot of people who coaches kids and everybody went. It's like John Wooden type in football, right? But he ends up getting 3 back surgeries, 3 spine surgeries. So he has this injury problem, and he drops out of a projected first round pick into a later round pick or free because of his back issues, and he ends up in the CFL. He goes from the CFL. He ends up playing five years for the Dolphins after. But we roomed together, and we would talk football 24/7. I mean, we just did so much technical work and how the games, and it just, the difference it made that first game was immense. It was just like a light had come on. Like, my God, this guy knows how to play. This guy knows. And so that was the first of a long run of divisional or league all-star type play, which went on for years and years after that. But it's really about being receptive to learning, but it's really about pairing that receptivity with someone who really knows. And there's a difference between really knowing and thinking, and you gotta find one of those guys. So I got lucky. A lot of people don't.
Bruce, how challenging was it for you in those first 5 or 6 years in the CFL? Because it's the BC Lions, it's the Ottawa Rough Riders, it's Calgary, it's Montreal. Before you sort of settle in for 5 or 6 years with Edmonton, were there doubts in your mind for those first 5 or 6 years?
Well, the first 2 years in Ottawa were brutal because the team was terrible. The team was terrible. The ownership was terrible. The team culture was terrible. Like, by the end of the year, there's me and 4 other guys lifting weights. I mean, it just, like guys that go in the tank. It was just like, just wasn't a good environment, right? It was just tough. And it's a tough environment to be in when you're young, to go to a really bad team, because there's no one to learn from. There's no one to teach you. It's like, you see this happen to kids all the time. They go to the wrong team, and there's no mentors. There's nobody that shows you really like difference between what you're doing and what you could be doing, your mistakes they made, and here little adjustments and that sort of thing. So that was challenging. After 2 years of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to sign. I was surprised. Well, I'd started for 2 years as a rookie, which is tough, right? And And so I had an opportunity to sign with anyone in the league. I decided to sign with the best team in the league, which was the Calgary Stampeders. And so I went there with high hopes. I thought that was going to be a fantastic place. But that was my first experience of a team that had a lot of talent, but a lot of internal division. The chemistry was bad between a lot of blame between the offensive blame the defensive blame the offense. There were racial issues on the team. There were things that I just didn't like being part of that. I just didn't agree with it. It wasn't what it looked like from the outside. And it sort of was a really interesting picture. This is what I love about team sport, is how a team can finish first in a league, in a small league. You can be the best team in the league for 10 years and win one Grey Cup. Because I mean, it's a brotherhood, it's togetherness, it's I mean, you tell me, Len, would you sacrifice more for yourself or for your beautiful daughters? It's not even close, right? So when teams have that togetherness, they have that love, they really build something special, care about each other. It's a tremendous thing. So that was disappointing from that perspective, but I ended up having a great year playing left tackle for them. Went to the Grey Cup. It was a great experience personally because I got aligned with a very good coach, and we did a ton of work. And we work after practice, and so it was a really good year that way. It was a tough year in the sense that it was the first time I dealt with that, basically getting traded. I mean, I wasn't protected in terms of a dispersal draft. You could only protect like 5 Canadians, and I ended up getting, and then Wally was trying to trade back for me, and all that. Montreal loved me because they were the Baltimore Stallions who had won the Grey Cup, who we played in the Grey Cup. And when they called me that they had got me in the dispersal draft, they told me they couldn't believe it. And they said that they had watched the 3 games leading up to the Grey Cup and the 3 playoff games. And they said, we got Calgary's best lineman, and we are amazed. I said, listen, you don't need to tell me that. You don't need to blow smoke. I'm coming anyway. I said, I'm selling my house. I'm not going to fight this. I'm coming. And they were like almost started. We're not blowing smoke. We're telling you the truth. This is, and they were right. I just didn't see it at the time. Like, I had improved so much over that year that the rest of my career surpassed all those guys quite a bit. But so I went to Montreal, and that's where I met that guy I was talking about earlier. I love that Montreal team. I mean, that was just an incredible experience. Like, I'll tell you what kind of player I was then, and what the culture of that team was. And Eric, you know what this is like, because this is I'm rooming with this guy I was telling you about earlier, who's showing me how to play and all that stuff. And this was still back in the era of newspapers and stuff. And we're living in this hotel in Montreal, in an apartment in a hotel. And we're sitting there, we're 0-3 to start the year. And I'm looking at the Montreal Gazette, and we're having breakfast. And I'm like, wow, these guys are saying that if we don't win this game, they're going to fire our coach. And that led to this whole, we were going to go to BC to play the next game. And BC Lions were a really good team that year. And Mark Dixon, who I was sitting across from, he was like, because I learned a lot that year, he was telling me that, players get coaches fired. You want to go your whole career without ever getting your coach fired. Coaches don't just get fired. It's a player's game. Players let coaches down, and then coaches get fired, and we had this whole discussion, and it really sits in my mind, and it sat in my mind all week, and I just dwelling on it. And well, by the time game day rolled around in Vancouver, I mean, I was just so bottled up, and I was playing left guard, and I mean, I was decleating guys all over the field. I was like a wild animal out there. Like I can remember smoking this guy, Derek McCready, and he's laying on the turf because I peeled back off a screen and ran 5 yards in the opposite direction just to viciously hit someone under the chin and lay him out. And he is like, "What is wrong with you, man? Like, what?" And we win the game. We go in the locker room. It's the first ever win for this franchise since they had moved from Montreal back in the days of, they had a pretty extensive history, and then they were gone from Montreal for like 15 years or something. Coach is holding the game ball in the air. There's this whole speech about how it's the first ever win, and it's the first ever. And he picked me as player of the game, a left guard. You got to think about what a left guard has to do. I mean, Cedarburg, to be player of the game. I don't know if there's a less important position on the team. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be doing something, right? That's like for a coach to not even see it in film, to see it from the sidelines, and you have this whole, one of the proudest moments of my career. But just so I played in Montreal. So we think about this. We started out 0-3 and we finished 13-5, So, I mean, we only lost 2 games the rest of the year. We went 13-2 the rest of the year. Right. And then, so basically, we built that over 2 years. The problem in Montreal was that we played and practiced on that old-fashioned AstroTurf. It was hard as hell. I was already running into some knee issues. I knew one of my knees was going to end my career. I was loving the game. I wanted to play as long as I could. There was one grass field, Commonwealth Stadium, and I played on that enough to know, man, that was the sweetest. It's just a beautiful field, and you just felt like you could play for 20 years, and I wanted to, and it was a very hard decision to leave as a free agent, leave Montreal. The money was the same. They were both paying me too much for what I was doing, and they, it was, and luckily for me, it worked out because, my knee did end my career, but I won. I was part of Grey Cup winning teams the last 2 years of my career, so it ended up working out.
In that journey from Montreal to Edmonton, there's a year there, 2001, where you decide to try something completely different. And I kind of, I don't think I've ever spoken to you about this, but I'm interested to know the whole XFL experience, because I think I remember being in some conversations with you, but you can tell us how that experience was.
Well, the tough thing was I was coming off a really, really great year. I lucked into, in Edmonton, I was playing left tackle. It was, but I lucked into being coached under a guy who made the Pro Bowl as a left guard for the Green Bay Packers. He had a 9-year career with the Green Bay Packers. And I mean, it was just the level of detail to which he held me to, the intensity, he was so good for me. I really, really had a great year. I had years that were almost as good or right around that, but it's so much easier when you have a coach just like so detail oriented, and he's catching stuff 3 weeks before it's an issue. You know what I mean? Like and it was just, so we finished the year sometime in November. But the last couple of games of the year, my right knee started locking up, and so I'd be in the in the locker room, and I'd be getting ready, and I remember this happening twice where my knee would lock up. It never happened on the field, thankfully, but this is what pro sports is like, right? You're just like, oh my God, like you don't tell anybody, you don't show anybody, you just try and you try and fix it. You try, you just, I don't know, like injuries and physical wearing down physically are part of all these sports, but to be good, you got to be tough, you got to be proud, you got to find a way, you got to be reliable, especially playing the position I played, where there's very rarely a viable backup at any level of football for an all-star caliber left tackle. So I knew I'd have to get it cleaned out with a scope after the season. So I go finish out the year, and then I hook up to get a scope from the guy I normally get my scopes from. I ended up with 6 different scopes over my career. So he does the surgery, and then but the XFL season is going to start January 2nd. So I have a very short window so you imagine you get wrapped up, you're not getting surgery till, early December. And anyway, I pushed my rehab way too hard. Like I was literally riding one of those cycles, in a gym that just I was up in Ottawa at the time, actually. And I'm so driven, right? It's just so driven and so, I don't know, and I look down and I'm bleeding out of all 4 scope holes, and I'm just like, oh, I gotta, geez, like, it's like, so anyway, I ended up getting an infection in my knee. And the way your immune system works is it's designed to work from the outside in. It's not designed to have, if you think from an anthropological standpoint, it's not designed to have holes drilled right into the center of any part of your body and then have infection bacteria be able to crawl right in those holes. And then it's just not designed to, and so you end up, it's a very serious thing, and you end up it's a sport ending thing for athletes. It's not an uncommon thing. It's something that happens, but anyway, so here I am trying to rush things, and I end up in the hospital on my back, and they will not even let me walk for like, I don't know how long I was in there, like 4 or 5 days. And then I'm on antibiotics, and then finally they let me out, and I'm on this antibiotic pump. And I like to play at a lean 295 back then. I was really fit. And so at this point, I'm depleted, and I remember I'm just thinking I gotta get ready for this XFL season. And so I'm in Nova Scotia, and I'm like, I've got this antibiotic pump on, and I'm like pulling logs and stuff in the snow, trying to get ready to go, trying to get my weight up to 285 or to, anyway, I end up going there, and I weigh in at 280, and I'm my immune system shot. First thing that happens when my immune system gets taxed is I lose my voice. So I'm there, I'm 280 pounds, and I'm on the biggest offensive line in that entire league. You're not going to believe this. This is the God's honest truth. The average weight of that offensive line, including the backups, was 335. I'm 280 pounds, offensive tackle guard, right? I ended up having to beat out, like it kind of came down between me and another guy, and he played 9 years in the NFL, right? And he was probably 325, big tackle and different. But I'm in this place where, I'm always experimenting with these different mental things, or that sort of never changed, right? and I'm really in this kind of meditative sort of space, right, where I'm really, really honed in on being present and being, and you know, so it was almost like when I would do my reps, I was really, really focused, especially in the game, and I was really honed in on details and finishing blocks and doing. And anyway, so I end up being so honed in on like finishing blocks in the exhibition game and putting guys on the ground and doing that. I got into 4 scraps in the exhibition game. The only exhibition game we're having that everybody's so offended with my, in my mind, playing to the whistle, right? I'm not even in a violent, I'm just in a really like this is, I don't know, it's just kind of, anyway, so they were so impressed by that performance and that the amount of scuffling around and stuff that I ended up making the team, and but making it as a backup, and just could never get myself back into the roster. I was trying to get my weight back up and but a lot of the stuff I was doing at that point, like a lot of the details around being good for me involved training that required a training space that allowed me to do a lot of balance work and a lot of like technical work, using progressive resistance principles, but some of the principles would be more oriented toward adapting to balance or doing hands fighting kind of work, or doing a lot of really specific drills that really helped me be good. And I couldn't find that environment or create that environment in LA. I just couldn't get anything set up the way I wanted. It was tricky. So anyway, so I ended up backing up the whole year, but it was the first time like I'd ever, like Vince McMahon had this weird thing where if we won the championship, we were going to split $1 million US between the whole roster. So I'm sitting in the stands in LA with my future wife and my brother, and I'm watching this game, and I'm not a big gambler, but I literally have $40,000 Canadian on the line, right? If our team wins, I get 40 grand minus taxes, and if they lose, it was just a tiny amount, like 3,000 or 2,000 or something like that. So we won the game, and it's like woohoo, back to Nova Scotia. So paid for my wedding and things.
Eric, you're going to round this out with your 3 questions for Bruce here before we wrap it up.
And now it's time for Eric's cut to the chase 5 questions.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw some quick ones at you, Bruce, and then one of the questions I have, because I know you read, is what book what's your favorite book of all time?
That's an interesting question. I do read a lot, and I've got some definite favorites and some books that I go back to because, of course, the reader changes, right? You should reread your favorite books, I'd say 3-4 times at least in your life. And I've got a few of those. I really do. In my particular situation, I've got 2 beautiful kids and a great wife. And we started this tradition every Christmas Eve. The 4 of us sit on the couch together, and we read the night before Christmas, and we'll each read a page, and then we'll read a page, and it circles back to the first person. So you look at your life, and at some point you're going to hit the end of the line, and I suspect that'll be one of my favorites.
Okay, I'll be curious to see if your taste in music has changed over the years. What album are you taking to Deserted Island that you're going to play it over and over again, and then you're going to love every minute of it?
I would say nothing's changed for me. I mean, I remember the first significant moment in my CFL career, before we played Hamilton in an exhibition game. I remember a coach coming up to me and telling me that you play well today, you're on the team, right? And I remember having my yellow Sony Walkman and my headphones, and I remember walking around the field and I was listening to Born to Run, Springsteen, and I've always Springsteen carried me from my teens on the farm all the way to today, as far as being just an incredible songwriter and just really my favorite. So I would have to go with his Double Live album, 1975 to 1985 is my all-time favorite.
Nice. Last question I'll throw at you is who's probably your favorite person over the years of being in the locker room? Who's been your favorite person to be next to in a locker room, whether it's at Acadia or the CFL teams?
I'd actually have to say it would be Jake. It'd be Jamie Pepper. Yeah, I mean, just for God, we had so much in common from a training standpoint, from a learning standpoint, music, playing everything, you know, sports, and basketball and squash and running and training and to world events, history, travel. You know, it was just such a wide gamut besides the humor and the stories. I'd say Jay.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, you know what, to see your growth from not being a football player, enjoying those great years at Acadia, and then, of course, carving out a tremendous career in the CFL. Bruce, this has been fun. Enjoyed doing it. A couple of Grey Cup rings that you like to show off, and proud of it. And, of course, as I said, you know, a great career with all kinds of all-star selections. And just great to have you on the AxeCast this week doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. See you, Berg.